Hey gamers, how you doing? Today I'm going to do a Resident Evil tie list. I love Resident Evil franchise. It's one of my favorite franchises ever. Maybe my second favorite after The Legend of Zelda. And why not? Let's do this tie list. Let's start with the original Resident Evil. I like the original Resident Evil. I gave the game lots of credit, but the game didn't age very well. The voice acting is awful, and there are much better Resident Evils these days. Now, Resident Evil. No, no, 0. Where is Resident Evil 0? Right here. I'm gonna put 0 and 1. 1 is a little better. I love both Resident Evil 0 and 1. I gave a lot of credits to these games. For me, these two games are true survivor horrors. And that's the reason that made me love the franchise. It was thanks to these games that I loved Resident Evil so much. Now, Resident Evil 2. I love this game. This is one of the best games ever made. Now, the original Resident Evil 3. I'm gonna be honest here. I don't like Resident Evil 3 that much. I think was a huge downgrade to Resident Evil 2. The game don't have many puzzles to resolve. And we are always running from the nemesis, wasting bullets. I don't think the game is that good. I like Jill and Carlos. I loved both characters, but in my personal opinion, there are much better Resident Evil games. Now, the Resident Evil Code Veronica. I'm gonna put this. It's hard to choose. I'm gonna put Resident Evil Code Veronica in first for now. It was the first Resident Evil that I played. It's one of the hardest Resident Evils in the franchise, and I love the game. It was Code Veronica that made me love Resident Evil. Now, after Code Veronica, we have Resident Evil 4. I'm gonna put Resident 4 here. Resident Evil 4 is for many one of the best games ever made. But the first time I played, I didn't like it. It was not a survival horror. It was not a Resident Evil game. It was just a third-person shooter with Leon. And being a third-person shooter and not be able to shoot and walk at the same time, I didn't like that. Those controls were great in the survival horror game, but not in the third-person shooter. Now, Resident Evil 5. Resident Evil 5 is a good game, not as good as Resident Evil 4. Once again, we can't shoot and walk at the same time like a normal shooter, but okay. I like the game, the bosses were very good, and in my opinion, is almost as good as Resident Evil 4. Now, Resident Evil 6. I know that many people don't like this game. Personally, I love the Leon campaign. Chris campaign was okay, and the other two, Ada and Sherry, was not that great. But finally, we can walk and shoot at the same time. That was a huge update, and I love it. Like I love almost all Resident Evils. Now, let's go to Resident Evil 7. I love Resident Evil 7. The first time I saw it, I didn't like it. Because original, the Resident Evil was a survival horror. Then they make Resident Evil a third-person shooter. And now a first-person shooter? But the game also have some scary moments. that remind us of the old games, and I'm okay with the game. Now, Revelations. I love Resident Evil Revelations. I'm gonna put Revelations in here and Revelations 2 in here. In my opinion, Resident Evil Revelations 1 and 2 are perfect examples how a modern Resident Evil should be. The game have the controls of the modern game and survival elements, and is faithful to the beginning of the franchise. It have some survival horror moments, you have puzzles to resolve, and the modern controls of the shooter. Now, Resident Evil 2 Remake. I think this is the best Resident Evil game ever made. In my opinion, this was the game of the year 2019. I loved this game. I couldn't expect better. The game blew my mind. Now, Resident Evil 3 Remake. Hmm. Mm, Let me think a little. Maybe here. I like Resident Evil 3, but the game is too short, and we finished the game in 5 hours maybe. And playing this game after the Resident Evil 2 remake, it doesn't help because Resident Evil remake, like I said, in my opinion, is one of the best games ever made. Resident Evil 3 is also a good game, but I expect a little more. Now, Resident Evil Aiden. I'm gonna. Nah, I'm not going to put a Resident Evil game that low. The game is not awful. I imagine that it's hard to do a Resident Evil game with the limitations of the Game Boy Color. The game is cool. It has some good moments, but Capcom should waited a little longer for the Game Boy Advance release to make a better game. So that's it, gamers. This is my Resident Evil tie list. I enjoy making this list. I have to do another one these days. Maybe with Resident Evil characters. Yeah, that's a good idea. So thanks very much for watching. Of course, there are going to be many different opinions. This is just my personal opinion about the franchise. I'm not saying that Resident Evil Code Veronica, for example, is better than Resident Evil Zero. It's just my personal tastes. It's not a fact. We all have different opinions, and that's why it's so good to live in this world. We all have the same tastes and our opinions. The world would be boring. So thanks again for watching the video. I hope you like it. See you again, my friends.